Well, good evening. We are very excited to have you with us for this amazing presentation, From Passion to Pressure, Why Kids Are Quitting Sports Too Soon. We have two amazing special guests, Dr. Alfred Atanda, the pediatric orthopedic surgeon, director of sports medicine at Nemours, and a master coach, legendary coach Paul Assaiante, one of the most successful coaches in college sports history. I want to take a moment just to share with you this incredible session tonight that we're going to do. It has a few different things to be aware of. First of all, you can see us, but we cannot see you. You're on mute, but please use the Q&A box to ask any questions that you may have throughout the course of this presentation. Share your questions as they arise, because we're going to do our best to answer all the questions as time allows. This presentation is being recorded and will be emailed to everyone who RSVP'd tonight after tonight's event. And like I mentioned, we're very, very excited about our two expert panelists. This topic, first of all, is very near and dear to all of our hearts. We all grew up, we were just talking about this, we all grew up playing multiple sports in our life, and how this topic has really thinned out, where there's very few seasonal multi-sport athletes that are coming up the lineage of athletes when they approached college athletics. When you look back at the top 100 NFL draftees from the past year, 92% were multi-sport athletes. However, when you look at in these grade school reports and these middle school and high school reports, you're seeing these children, which we'll talk about tonight, playing one sport year-round. In the 80s, I was lucky to be nationally ranked in tennis. And there was one sports academy, a tennis academy called Harry Hopman's, and another one that popped up later called Nick Bollettieri Tennis Academy. And I remember as a 14-year-old playing the nationals, I used to get demolished by athletes coming from Texas, coming from California, coming from Florida, because they played year round. They played 12 hours a day, and they just were, the top of the nation. And by the time they turned 16 and 17, and I was having a chance to play them again in nationals, and I was a multi-sport athlete, I was lucky enough to start beating them. And I couldn't understand why. I didn't feel worthy enough. They played much more than I did. They were much better. And I realized by the time I went to college, after asking them, I found out they hated the sport. They couldn't stand it. They also had injuries that they couldn't sustain. So tonight's topic really tunes into this, because what was happening in the 80s in the sport of tennis is now happening in every sport.
Right.
Our two guest speakers are master subject experts in this. Dr. Alfred Atanda is a pediatric orthopedic surgeon at the Nemours Children's Hospital in Delaware, where he serves as the chief of the Center for Sports Medicine, the chief clinician experience, and is also assistant professor for orthopedic surgery at the Sidney Kimmel Medical College at Thomas Jefferson University. He's a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine. He also completed his residency at the University of Chicago Medical Center. And Dr. Atanda also completed his fellowship in pediatric orthopedic surgery at the Nemours Children's Hospital in Delaware, and the sports medicine surgery at the Rothman Institute at Thomas Jefferson University. Welcome, Dr. Atanda.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Michael. Coach, it's great to be on here with you. Thanks for Jacob and Sophia for setting this up as well. Yeah, this is very near and dear to my heart. I played soccer for about 30 years when I was younger. I'm old now, so I don't play anymore, but my family's originally from Ghana, so everything is about soccer. The youngest of 7 kids, there's 22 grandkids, and we basically eat, breathe, sleep soccer and sports. And, most of my motivation, to be honest with you, going into orthopedic surgeon was to treat young, healthy people who just had a misstep or, broke something, tore something, whatever. Youngsters do very, very well, surgically speaking. They have few complications, few comorbidities, and it's great to get them back on track. But as this webinar and this discussion will dictate, There are a lot of things that go into keeping people healthy that literally have nothing to do with their bodies. Nemours is a huge proponent of this component of um, whole child health. We know that, only about 15% of what dictates your health is from your body. The rest is what you do at home, at school, food, nutrition, the emotional and psychological aspect, etc. And it wasn't until probably about 10 years into my practice that I really, really understood the non-physical issues that these kids are having. And I'm very excited to just share my experience, my thoughts, hear what Coach and Michael have to say, and really have a great, vibrant discussion.
Doctor, thank you so much. Our other subject matter expert is Coach Paul Assaiante, a person who I've known, had the opportunity to know for over 30 years. He is a master coach, but an incredible human being like Dr. Atanda. So he not only motivates the Trinity College squash team on and off the court, but he also motivates any audience he is in front of. He's an experienced coach who's earned him the title as the winningest coach in college sports history and the job of the U.S. Olympic coach as well. Coach Assaiante invigorates his audiences to embrace their fears in order to remove the obstacles that are in the way of their successes. Over the years, he's learned that successfully achieving goals only happens when you help people learn to deal with their overcoming their fears. And Coach Assaiante is an inspiring human being to so many different audiences, such as corporate employees to young adults across the country, like ESF campers. He also wrote an amazing book called Run to the Roar that a certain company that has a mouse as their special themed animal, I think has the rights to, which a movie will probably be coming out in a couple of years from now, starring probably Coach Assaiante. So, Coach, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, it's an honor. I can tell you I'm humbled whenever we're on these things, and I'm really excited to hear Dr. Antanda, who is eloquent in his words. And I started off my career at West Point and 52 years ago. And at that time, I embarked on this career of coaching, because I believe that you can learn more through sport than you can almost any other field. You learn how to win, you learn how to lose, how to strategize, adjust on the fly. So it was my goal to help people become more successful in life through their sporting experience. Now, fast forward 52 years later, what I've learned is my purpose in life, which is messaging. I want to share what I've learned over those 52 years. And as we know, you learn more from losing than you learn from winning. And so most of the sharing that is coming from me now is a product of my mistakes, my failures, my ego, all the things that, got in the way. And it's an interesting comment, but, they say that the older you are, the more that you learn. And I think by the time I figure it all out, I'll have run out of time.
Well, Coach, thank you for joining us. And audience members, this is a rare treat. And, to have two experts, more or less about rehab and prehab happening right now. And this is special. And so we're going to turn over to Dr. Atanda to walk us through what he's seeing out there in the world today with the way youth are operating, with what he has to work with. So take it away, Doctor.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, so you can see the learning objectives here. I mean, basically, I'll paraphrase and comment on what I have learned sitting in the walls of a youth sports surgery clinic for the past 15 years. I always, throughout my training, anticipated that everything would just be about bones and muscles and joints and strength and surgeries, etc. But I've learned so many things that are affecting these kids and their families too, to be honest with you. And, I was never trained in this sort of thing, so I kind of had to learn it on the fly. And now that I'm a little bit more versed, I love being a part of these sorts of discussions, like Coach said, just to spread that word. There's ideas worth sharing, kind of like TED Talks, and you get on any platform you can to share it, and hopefully you inspire at least one person to at least think about how they approach things differently. And if I can do that today, that'll be a victory for me. So I want to start with the slides here by showing a story. For those of you scoring at home, on the top left, that's a medial epicondyle fracture of a patient that I saw, a 15-year-old kid playing football in high school on a Friday night. He hurt his elbow and he goes to urgent care #1. He's a child and his arm is swollen, so they kind of got nervous. They never shot an x-ray and they just sent him to another urgent care, believe it or not. He goes there, he gets his x-ray, it shows this fracture, and of course, you know, it's often surgical, not necessarily an emergency, but there was a lot of urgency to them, and they splinted him up and they said, you have to go to the ER right away. You have a, you know, serious injury, you need surgery within a day. He goes to that emergency room out on the main line outside of Philadelphia, and of course, it's an adult emergency room. They don't treat children. So he goes there, and then he's told that he's got to go to DuPont or Nemours because we treat kids. And then we see him. He's still in his splint. He's been in, you know, 4 healthcare facilities. He's gotten his height and weight checked, his insurance checked, paid all these copays. And then we realized that, yes, he has this fracture, but it's not an emergency. You can do it electively within a week or 2 and probably just be fine. So we sent him home. And as you can imagine, you know, as we delve into this story, the reason this came up to me is because the mom was told at all of these sites that her son needed urgent surgery and that he was coming to Nemours for that. And then when we send him home, they refused to pay because they were told that they were get one thing and there was a complete discrepancy as to what they got. This isn't necessarily the focus of the talk, but the way I want to tell this story is by using this as an example of all the very common things that a lot of our kids go through. And you know, as you can see, so there's a lot of things that the kids experience. Most of what, Jacob, if you can flip to the next slide, most of what we think about is the pain the kid is in, the resources that are utilized, and money. But that's only the tip of the iceberg, right? I mean, yeah, he did go to 4 places. He was in pain the whole time, and it was an expensive journey, utilizing a lot of hospital resources. But there are so many things under the surface that over time, we don't really even think about in surgical world, you know, the amount of time that it spent. It took him about 9 hours to go to all those places. Obviously, he was scared. Mom felt guilty that the child was in pain. She had a lot of questions. She was anxious. There's expectations. Of course, she's Googling things. She's calling people. All the while, we didn't really have a good way to get that knowledge and information to them. And after talking with this mom for an hour, I realized that just her son being in pain and not being able to play for a while was the least of their problems. And when you really delve into the emotional and the psychological aspect of things, it makes you really think about kind of what our patients and our families experience as they're navigating the healthcare ecosystem. So one of the things I want to touch on is this idea, and we kind of mentioned it pre-webinars, this idea of, Jacob, next slide, sports specialization. A lot of people think, you know, after Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers, you know, you got to do something for 10,000 hours to become an expert. But we know those are the things that usually don't involve injury. So if you're playing the violin or chess or you want to be a math whiz or something, yeah, the more you do it, the better you're going to be. But with injuries and in sports, it's a little bit different. And a lot of people just assume, again, that you start at an early age and you do it all the time, that it's going to be beneficial for you. But as you can see from the slide, there's so many things that affect these kids when we push them too hard and we don't put things in the appropriate context for them. So we have some guidelines, if you will, coming up. Jacob, thank you. These are just kind of rules of thumb. This comes from the AOSSM, or the American Orthopedic Society for Sports Medicine. The thing you can see on the top is making sure and trying to encourage folks to play on one team at a time. Just like you see in the pros, you know, we're out in Eagles country and Phillies country. You know, our folks out here, I mean, they're playing for one team, right? They're not playing for multiple teams. They're definitely not doing it in the same season. We want folks to delay specializing. I would say for girls, probably wait till about a year or so after they've started their menses, because that's when they're kind of going through their peak growth velocity. And for boys, probably when they start shaving. So that's going to be more in high school. Again, when you're talking about the hours per week that kids play, a good rule of thumb is that, they shouldn't play more than their age in years. So the example there, if your 13-year-old is playing baseball or what have you, they shouldn't do more than that in hours per week. We want to make sure they have appropriate rest, at least 2 to 3 days a week, and again, with recovery time. And this is a big thing you can see on the far left. We recommend no more than 8 months per year of an organized sport. Now, if your kid's bouncing off the walls and they really need to be physical year round, there's nothing wrong with that. But we'd like for them to change it up, right? So if you do something for 8 months of the year, let's say you're a soccer player, then maybe play baseball for 4 months of the year. And it doesn't have to be 4 months in a row. You could play 3 months of soccer, 1 month of baseball, another 3 months of soccer, another month of baseball. But the idea is to really just try different things, do different things, leverage different body parts and different skill sets that can carry over to whatever your primary sport is without fatiguing yourself, burning yourself out both physically and emotionally. I wanted to say a few words about some famous people that you all know, Hall of Famers in their own right. And from the research that I did, most of these folks, if not all of them, never really committed to that sport that you see them up here before high school. Tom Brady didn't really get serious about football till he was 14. Michael Strahan, I don't even think he played till he was in 11th grade or so. He started overseas and then he came back to Texas. Tim Duncan, obviously NBA Hall of Famer. He was a swimmer growing up. And he was from St. Thomas, I believe, or somewhere in the Virgin Islands, and his pool was decimated by a hurricane. And he's like 6'10", and he has nothing else to do. So he started playing basketball. A lot of you probably know Dennis Rodman didn't really grow till he was like 18. He was 6 foot, 6'1" when he graduated high school, got a job. I think he was working at the Detroit airport of all places. And he was 6'9" all of a sudden by the time he was 19. So point being, obviously, these are kind of egregious outlying examples. But the bottom line is you don't necessarily have to be the best in playing your sport from the age of 3 to get to a really high level. And there's obviously countless more stories that we can share. So moving forward, what we can see here is the biggest thing is expectations, right? So we talked about, these pros, they weren't necessarily, playing that sport their whole lives. And people come to us in the clinic assuming that their child is going to be the next Tim Duncan, Tom Brady, Tiger Woods, LeBron James. And, that's quite possible. But if you look at the numbers and you look at the stats, when you look at millions and millions of kids playing high school sports, and if you highlight here on the far right, only about 5, maybe 6% of these athletes actually make it to play in the Division I level, or at any level, excuse me. It's much lower for Division I, but when you look at all divisions, it's about 6%. And most people walking around, they don't believe that applies to their child. They know the stats, but they say, okay, my child is different. But unfortunately, these stats apply to everybody. So when you want to counsel these folks and let them know, like, yeah, we want your kid in high school to play sports. We want them to have fun. We want them to have a good time, get exercise. But the end goal can't necessarily just be to make it to the NCAA level because it's a very low probability of doing that. With further stats that we'll show here, you can see that when you look at going from high school to the pros, on the bottom left, you can see it's even less. So 0.04% of high school athletes were ever drafted in the pros. But in contrast to that, when you look at youth athletes and you ask them if they want to become professionals one day, up to a third, if not more than a third of them, say they want to make it to the pros. So there's obviously a big discrepancy because a lot of kids want to go to the pro level, but only a very, very, very small handful actually do that. So moving forward, we can see that this is a great opportunity to talk, right? Because everybody has their story, their neighbor's story, their friend's story. But it's good to really talk this out because, again, it's kind of like gambler's fallacy. A lot of people think, oh, if I just keep playing, I'll win my money back. We all know that that's never going to be the case. And it's the same thing with youth sports. If the end goal is to make it to something that's very, very improbable, then what's motivating you during that journey is going to be a little tough, and it may not be in alignment with what you think you want versus what is actually best for you. Coach, do you have any thoughts about that? Or Michael?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for asking. I deal more with the emotional and the psychological piece of all of this as I watch people come through. And, I've had a lot of experience with international athletes as well. And I find with the international players that come over to college and university, by and large, they had a wider base of experience in multiple sports growing up. And I think children should have seasons. And I think that their passion should dictate the process. We see it in my sports, in tennis and squash, where a pro will tell a parent, this could be the next coming of Maria Sharapova. That's all they need to hear. And now this child is doing this 24/7. And yes, the overuse injuries are a factor, but also the emotional and the mental damage that gets done in that is irreversible. I often joke about, I want to see balanced children. And you can tell what a balanced child looks like by walking into their garage. If you walk into a garage and you see tennis rackets and a bicycle and a pogo stick and golf clubs and summer reading, that child is on its way to a fairly balanced and healthy experience. Most of the places I go, there are 3 perfectly restrung rackets sitting in the corner of the garage getting ready for the next event. And the last thing that I'd like to touch on, again, dealing with the why are we having kids focus so early on one activity? I think whether it's conscious or unconscious, and it's probably more unconscious, parents are looking this at it as an ROI. We're investing all of this time and all of this money to be going to tournaments and every weekend of our lives as travel squads and everything else. We'd like to see something back for that. And, I read something recently that really hit me hard. And it was, when your passion is more powerful for an activity than your child's, there's going to be problems.
Right.
And I'm dealing with the problems at the college level.
Coach, I thought how Dr. Atanda outlined this was pretty amazing. And, he talked about the 10,000 hours. I think parents read that book from Malcolm Gladwell, several years ago, and it just was fixated in their mind about the 10,000 hours. Really, when you look at the 10,000 hours, the way Gladwell does it, that's what you need to really master something. And when you look at the breakdown of that, that's basically 417 days. When you devote 3 hours per day, for example, it would take 3,333 days, or just over 9 long years. And in sport, I think parents are thinking like, that's what we need to do to get to Division I. That's what we need to do to get a scholarship. Can you talk about that? Because there's such a misconception, there's such a disconnect that parents today believe if you master this sport, starting at 6, my child will get into the Ivy League, or my child will get into a Division I sport. Can you please talk about this? Because there's so many people out there. There's so much case study that parents are not reading. I don't know why, but if you could talk to this would be great. Both of you, this is such an important moment.
Go ahead, doctor.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate, because I think when you do spend all of your time and energy and money on your child with some sort of external motivation, i.e. getting a college scholarship or a pro scholarship, a pro contract, what do you do when you don't get that? Because as you saw, only 0.04% of high school kids go to the pros. So there's 99.9% of kids who don't have that. And after a lifetime, again, as a parent myself, of shepherding kids around and driving them around, I've seen a lot of parents become resentful, actually, of their child, because they dump all this energy into their child thinking they'll get something, but the thing that they're getting isn't really what they were hoping for. And what I tell people is, listen, if you want your kid to play a sport year round, however many hours a day, however many days a week, the only thing that you're guaranteeing is that you're exposing them to more potential injury. That's the only thing I can guarantee you. I can't guarantee they'll play in college. Can't guarantee they'll go for the pros. I can't even guarantee they'll be any good. But one thing especially when the younger they are and the more they're growing, their growth plates are open, bodies are full of cartilage, etc. That's really the only thing that you're doing. And a lot of people, unfortunately, don't realize that.
Wow, that's powerful. Also, you're preparing to expose them to tremendous emotional damage and self-esteem and self-doubt. And it's just, these little bodies are not ready for that pounding and that use.
Yeah.
Neither are their little minds and their little psyches. And it's it's in the name of love. We don't want to be overly critical of people. This is being done in the name of love. We want to do everything we can to make sure Susie Snowflake, has the greatest experience in life. But do you really want to give them the best gift possible? Let them fail. If you really want your child to be successful as an adult in this world, let them fail. Let them skin their knee. Let them experience many things. Coaching at West Point was interesting because cadets are competing in every minute of their days, in every activity that they do. I don't think I've ever been around more competitive people because they did so many things, and everything they was doing was competitive and high stakes. And I think for the young ones, let them play, let them experience all of this stuff. When their passion directs the next step, which doesn't have to be a terminal step, they can always change their mind. I think that's what we need to be listening to.
Yeah, Coach. I mean, it's so true. I mean, there's so many storylines when you look at some of these pretty amazing, especially in the world of tennis, when you see some of these athletes who came through, turned pro at age 14, 15, by the time they were in their 20s, they weren't speaking to their parents anymore. They hated their parents, even though they became successful. And I grew up with a lot of people who were very successful as juniors, but failed to make it to, to the Division I level or to the pros because they had, surgery and they couldn't play it anymore. And they hated their parents. And it was just really sad. And I think there's something to be said with what Dr. Atanda said about, the seasonal sport athlete is so important. There's a recovery moment. You're using different body parts that you haven't used or you're not overusing. And then I also think that there's something to be said about allowing your child to own their sport, where they are taking pride in playing that sport. And I know you said, Coach, let them fail. I think let them fail fast because kids are resilient. Let them fail. They're going to get back up and they're going to keep going. And I think that's a healthy thing.
Can I interject here also? We had an interesting experience recently at Trinity, and it made me realize something. A lot of the pressure, the pushing, the managing, the organizing of these kids' journeys is really for the benefit of the coach or the parent.
Right.
And so our lacrosse team had a good season, but they had to wait 2 weeks to find out whether or not they were going to get a bid to go to the NCAAs. And the chances were very slim. So the coach just let them be for 2 weeks. Maybe they went to the gym, all of a sudden they get the bid. And the coach is self-flagellating. Oh my gosh, have I made a mistake? Should we have been practicing these 2 weeks? They go to the game and they play the best game of the year. They were refreshed, energized, pure in their motivation. We pushed too hard. And the value of physical recovery, spiritual recovery, and emotional recovery is so important.
Right.
I think this is a perfect segue in our next section for Dr. Atanda. And Doctor, I think you're the perfect person to speak to it. I will say this, about 6 years ago, we did some consulting for Arsenal, the big soccer, European team. And I was amazed watching how they practiced. So different from the US, where there's skills and drills immediately. So I think your next section talks about this. Take it away.
Yeah. So we talk about this notion of unstructured free play. I'm 46. I grew up in the 80s and 90s. I think we're all contemporaries here. And, back in that day, you go home, you get home from school, you go in the backyard with your buddies, you go on the street. That's what we usually did. And you divvy up teams, you put cones down, you make rules, you fight, you do all the things. And then when it's dark out, everybody goes home and eats dinner. And you had a full day in 2 hours, and the big benefit to that is that there are no adults. The inmates are running the asylum, you're just doing your own thing, but you're learning together, you're learning on your own, and you're doing it without any pressure. And this idea of unstructured free play, unfortunately, has kind of disappeared. in most venues in this country, in most sports. If you're not paying anything formal, or paying a lot of money, or doing anything with a lot of elite level coaching and such, then you feel like you're left out. As you can see here, there's tons and tons of benefit to unstructured free play. And, when we say like we don't want kids playing sports all the time, we don't want them playing year round, I'm a huge advocate of unstructured free play all the time. If they want to run around on their own 10 hours a day because they feel like doing it, that's fine. When they twist their ankle or their knee hurts, they're going to sit out or they're going to go home. But imagine, when it's organized and you fly halfway across the country and you're 9 and 3 of your siblings came and your parents came and you show up in that, 10-game tournament, and the first game you hurt your ankle. What are you going to do? Sit out? You're going to keep playing. You're going to push yourself no matter how much it hurts, no matter how much you can't do anything. And playing through pain is something, as you can see here, that comes up a lot. And we don't want kids necessarily doing that. A lot of the times it is from overuse. What we tell families and a lot of our pediatricians that we consult with is that you want to make sure that the patient's or the client's performance isn't really affected. If they're still able to play at a reasonably high level to whatever they're used to, then it's probably not too bad. We always want to look for physical signs, make sure they're not swollen or red or really, really limping. And a lot of it should resolve with rest. If it doesn't resolve, then that's when, you bring them to folks like myself or some of our non-operative sports medicine doctors. So that whole old adage of, no pain, no gain, I think it holds true 10%. The rest of it, probably you're just hurting yourself. Another thing that we talk about is this notion about cross training. A lot of people want to know if it's good or bad. CrossFit gyms are everywhere. And just like a lot of the things that are involved in sports in this country, it's a big business. So now they have cross training for kids. They have bigger, faster, stronger clinics and all of this stuff. We want the kids to be a part of that. But I try to tell people it should be focused on the individual child, right? So when adults go to CrossFit, it's usually a competition. They put out however many 50-pound weights, and whoever can do 10 reps the quickest wins, or whoever lifts it the highest or the furthest wins. But it should really be about the child and what they can do. We want to focus on a little bit of weight or body weight. We want to teach them discipline and this idea of personal accomplishment. So, okay, today I was able to do 10 reps. Maybe tomorrow I can do 11, But if you line up 10, 12-year-olds, some of them are going to be 6 feet tall. Some of them are going to be 5 feet tall. Some of them are going to be thin. Some of them are going to be strong. So you can't really compare all of them. And the competition aspect, I think, should be really, really minimized when we're dealing with cross-training, and should focus, again, on the individual. Another thing we want to talk about is now that it's springtime, it's baseball season. So there's tons and tons of literature in the orthopedic at our orthopedic conferences that talk about baseball overuse injuries. Just a couple of quick rules of thumb that we put here. You don't have to memorize all the pitch counts, but you want to just make sure that you're minimizing the pitch counts, that the kids are maintaining proper form, they have good strength and flexibility. And those three things at the top, overuse, poor form, and poor strength and flexibility, are the three-headed monster of overuse injuries, basically. And when your body's in pain, that's usually a sign, especially if you're a youngster, that some aspect of this is off. The easiest thing to control is the volume, right? Just do less of whatever it is you do. We tell people not to pitch and catch in the same game. So we get a lot of folks that they adhere to the pitch counts, they pull the pitcher, and then when they leave the mound, they go and they catch, or they go and they play short or second or third or what have you. That's not optimal. When the starting Phillies pitcher comes out, they don't go back in to play at a different field position. And obviously our kids are not professionals, but we can learn a lot from professionals in how they take care of their bodies, because they do things that, are probably in their best interest, mostly because people have a lot of money invested in them. Whereas in the youth sports, it's the direct opposite, right? You are paying money for your child to play. So the incentive is to keep them playing, right? There's a lot of money that a lot of adults are making off of our kids, and there's nothing wrong with that. This is a free world and a capitalistic society, but we just have to do it in a way that we make sure we're not doing it at the expense of these kids. And I put at the end there a lot of talk about curves and off-speed pitches, etc. The jury's still out onto actually what the best advice is. Some people say that you can start curveballs at an early age. Most people say you should wait till you're older. I tell my families and my kids to wait, especially for the boys, wait till they're shaving to really get into a lot of these breaking and off-speed pitches, because that's when we know kind of have a rough sense of their bodies being able to handle it. So switching gears, we don't we want to beat up sports too much, but there are certain challenges we want to highlight. You can see here we have a schematic of the different kind of facets of youth sports. Obviously, it's big business. There's burnout. People's priorities aren't necessarily in alignment with what they're doing and how that could be best for them. You see that little 6-year-old with a soccer ball and a book and a violin in his book bag. Obviously, we do want kids to be multifaceted and doing different things, but it can't overwhelm them to the point where they turn out like the young lady on the bottom left, where it's just too much for them to handle. But, we're not here to beat up on sports. There are obviously plenty of benefits of youth sports as well. And oh, sorry. We'll hit that in the next slide. We could take a few minutes for this. Sorry, I missed that little interlude. Coach or Mike, did you want to chime in a little bit?
Sure.
Yeah.
No, go, Michael. Go.
No, I was going to tee it up for you, Coach. Go right ahead. I was going to mention when I went to Arsenal, I did see just a lot of free play, a lot of drop the ball and start playing, and just no drills, no skill development. Let's let them have fun for the first 20 minutes before we even begin the practice. Love to hear what you think, Coach.
Yeah, so the idea of unstructured free play has so many phenomenal benefits. And in my mind, one of the greatest is problem solving. Mommy and daddy are not there. There's not a paid referee there that some father can beat up after the game. You all have to figure it out. And that leads me to the concept of ownership. We need to let these young people own the process, own their journey. I heard a funny comedian once tell this story about a little boy, is walking by his window of the kitchen, and his mother's cleaning the dishes. And she says, "Where are you going, sweetheart?" He says, "Well, I'm going to the lake." And she says, "Okay, well, don't drown." And now, all these years later, the little boy is walking past the kitchen. Mother's working on the computer. She says, "Where are you going?" "I'm going to the lake." She comes sprinting out of the house, puts suntan lotion all over him, swimmies on his arms, and she escorts him to the pond. Now, obviously, that's an exaggeration, but it's not that much of an exaggeration. And so I think ownership, which I think does come from the free play opportunity, is important. The other thing you talked about, I believe in the competitive muscle, the muscle that allows you, obviously we don't want people paying. There's a difference between pain and strain, right, doctor? If you're a little uncomfortable, okay. But there's this whole topic now in our society about emotional discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
And we live in a world of special accommodation. But the world, when you're an adult, doesn't give you special accommodation. So if what we're doing is designed to help them become more balanced, more successful adults, then we need to push a little bit to make sure that they're comfortable at being uncomfortable. I want kids to compete when they're not at their best. That's a great experience to be able to go in, take your lumps, shake that person's hand, and say, "Well done," rather than bailing on the experience and saying, "I'll wait till I'm really 100%. Life doesn't work that way. And
Right.
so this is also a very high focus for me right now.
Coach, when you were looking at putting together a team every year, I mean, you had people from all over the world wanting to play for you, right?
Mm.
So you were looking at the top 1% of the elite of the elites when it comes to squash players around the world. What was that criteria that you were looking for, both internally, externally, and also how much parental involvement did you even have in the discussion with the student athlete that you were recruiting?
Well, in the recruiting process, there's been two lives. In the early stages, I would accept anyone who was a world-class talent. Now we have a bunch of banners on the ceiling. I'm a little more discriminating about who I want to recruit.
21 national.
And so now, if the first email I get is from a parent, that child doesn't get recruited. And if in speaking to this young person, I find out that this person is, one, not character large, maybe not being honest about what they've gone through, um, I don't need knuckleheads in the program. And
Right.
so we're just looking for people who are going to buy into the fact that you will be one piece of the entire process.
Mhm.
And even if you're the best player on the team, if you're a freshman, you're the lowest form of life on earth. We want a rite of passage. We want everyone to buy into the group, the team, the team, the team, because we're all members of the cultural team of our world.
Right.
So great. Wow. Doctor, the recovery piece that prevents, injuries from recurring as well as the burnout, talk a little bit more about that. What would be your suggestions when it comes to, recovery between, one sport to the next? I mean, that chart was amazing. I mean, that chart is incredible about from the amount of that practice time per week to, how much sleep to everything. I mean, that is,
Right.
I mean, every school, every team, every league, they literally should sign a contract to helping kids develop that way.
Yeah. And again, I touched on how adult professionals kind of carry themselves and how they manage themselves. You can learn a lot from them. So if you look at baseball, the pitchers have a 5-day rotation. 5, 6 day, 4 days, depending on how many they have, they pitch, and they don't do anything for however many days. You look at the NFL, they play their game on Sunday. I don't think most of the folks do anything on Monday. They're just recovering. Maybe Tuesday they do a light walkthrough. When I did my training, I was at the Rothman Institute at Jefferson. We took care of the Eagles and the Phillies and the Flyers. So that's what astounded me the most is that they actually didn't spend a lot of time playing. They spent most of their time watching film, watching tape, learning. As you mentioned, abroad in other countries for soccer, they're not playing 5, 6, 7 games a week or 5 games in a weekend. These soccer tournaments that we do in this country, they hit their one game, maybe two in a week, depending on how things go, and the rest of the time is for recovery, rest, technical stuff, learning, reading. And I think again that whole money piece unfortunately drives people to be playing games and tournaments in this country, whereas we should be focusing on allowing them to play, but also allowing them to heal and recover and really utilize that journey as a marathon as opposed to a sprint.
I think, Doctor, if you could walk us through those benefits of the psychological, the physical, and the social, I think that's really important because I think some parents maybe are thinking a little bit differently, and I think
Yeah.
it would be important.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we have the benefits here. The physical benefits are pretty obvious, not just for getting stronger, for getting faster, getting bigger, but it has very objective criteria of things that can help you from a physical standpoint. As you can see, the psychological benefits are obviously there: good self-esteem, life satisfaction, less depression and anxiety. Social benefits, the kids are working together, they're problem solving, as Coach mentioned. They learn discipline, competition, accountability, and this idea of self-motivation. I think we tend to put leashes on our kids and kind of navigate them like they're dogs, but we should just really put guardrails around them, and they need to be wide enough so the kids can bump into them and fail and fall. And we're kind of hovering over them just to make sure that, they don't kill themselves, but we're not helicopter parents. We drive them to where they need to go. We pay for what they need to do, but they should really be driving the bus, if you will. They should, maybe not when they're 6, but, when they're 12, 13, 14, they can work with their teammates and their parents about their schedule, whether or not they just want to skip a tournament, to give their body a rest. It should be more about empowering them to do the things that's setting them up to be responsible, well-adjusted adults. And I think at the end of the day, that's what anybody wants for their child. And we're all human. Sometimes we get caught up in different things. I want to share a couple more things before we break. This idea of long-term athlete development. So when I talk about a marathon versus a sprint, you can see there people aren't really training to compete till they're 15, 16, 17 years old. All of the stuff that happens before that should just be learning the fundamentals, learning to move your body, learning to use your body, learning how to train. Unfortunately, a lot of the competition starts very, very early in this country. But if you look at it this way, we want people to be active for life. right? When you come to me in the clinic and your knee hurts and I give you, you know, a recommendation to sit out for 6 weeks, I don't want to hear like, well, I have this tournament in 3 days. You know what I mean? It can't just be what's in front of your face. You have to look at yourself on a long journey as an athlete, whether you're at an elite level, Olympic level, pro level, collegiate level, rec level. Um, it's all your journey. Just because it's at a higher skill level doesn't mean we have to ignore the fact of maintaining that focus on what's best for you overall in the long term. A couple more things that I wanted to touch on. I think, Coach, you talked about this idea of letting people fail. So resilience is something that unfortunately, when you hover over your kids or you're a helicopter parent and you're striving for excellence, you're striving for perfectionism, you don't understand that failure isn't the opposite of success. It's the key fundamental foundational component of success. When you look at people like Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Tiger Woods, they haven't won everything that they do. You know how many shots Michael Jordan and LeBron James missed during their careers? You know, we obviously celebrate the wins and we celebrate, you know, what they're able to accomplish. But what you don't see behind the scenes is when they lost or they failed, what they told themselves about how to get back up, how to dust themselves off. And if you want to if you want to teach your child anything, you need to teach them how to fail. Because as an adult who's navigated the world, there's going to be a lot of obstacles. There's going to be a lot of roadblocks. And as Coach mentioned, mommy and daddy aren't going to be there when you're 18 years old and you're a freshman in college and you hate your roommate, or you failed your first test, or you tried out for the club soccer team and you didn't make it. These are all things that actually happened to me when I was a freshman in college at the University of Virginia, and I had to deal with it. I had to figure it out. I grew up 6 hours away from UVA. My parents were nowhere to be found. They couldn't just drive over and help me. And, you know, being the youngest of 7 kids and Ghanaian immigrants, I learned a thing or two about adversity, and I was able to get through that kind of stuff. But I saw some of my colleagues and my comrades, both in college, medical school, residency, and beyond, have a lot of trouble because, you know, we're smart, we get good grades, we're top of our classes, blah, blah, blah. But you're going to get to a point where you're not the best. You may not be the worst, but you may not be what you were used to being your whole life. And you can see here from the schematic, there's tons and tons of things that failure and overcoming adversity can do for you. Obviously, building your self-esteem, learning from your mistakes, being optimistic, having the appropriate social skills, problem-solving skills, etc. So I know we're coming up on time. I think I just have the one slide left. A couple more, sorry. Again, how to prevent kids from quitting sport. That's kind of the whole theme of this. And Jake, if you get to the next slide, we'll see, again, why do kids quit sports? Mostly because it's not fun and mostly because there's too much pressure. Now, it not being fun can come from a whole host of things, whether it's too competitive, too much emphasis on winning, they're not playing enough. But at the end of the day, these kids signed up for a sport that they seemingly liked and loved. Something had to happen for all of a sudden that they don't want to do it anymore. And it's not because they're not interested. It's because of all these extra things. So you can see here just a few things that we can think about as we try to make sports fun, as we try to have that self-motivation and encourage the child, support them. Focus on the process and not the result. That's Joel Embiid for the Sixers, always talking about the process. You know, obviously everybody wants to win, but what's more important is how you train, how you develop, and how you prepare. If you don't give people those skills and then they go out into the world or they get to a higher level of competitive play, they're going to have some problems. So just to close out, I always, always, always tell my parents, again, you have to be a good example for your child. If your child is playing a game and they look over in the stands and they see you yelling at the refs and giving the finger to the refs and fighting other parents, which I have seen physically, that's going to affect them. They may not say anything about it. They may not talk to you about it. They may not ask questions about it. But everything our kids see us do profoundly affects them. So if we can learn how to control our own emotions, control our own anxiety, and really just focus on the child playing and having fun, I think that's like the most important thing that I tell my parents. And at the end of the day, kids just want to make their parents proud of them. They want to spend time with their parents. They like their parents watching them. That's why they do all of these sports. You know what I mean? The fact that it's organized is completely irrelevant. They want to be having fun, enjoying themselves, spend time with their families and their parents and their friends, and have a good life. And I think sometimes we get caught up, again, we're all human, but if we can kind of go back to basics and the foundation of why our kids are doing what we signed them up for in the first place, then I think that's a good rule of thumb.
Before we go to the Q&A, that was brilliant, Doctor. I'd like to just talk about this concept of failure for a moment,
Yeah.
because in competition, in everything in life, there's going to be failure. For the people who are overseeing these children's journeys, coaches, parents, that is the ultimate teachable moment. When they're young, they don't know how to frame what just happened. And as you said, is mommy upset with me? You know, have I disappointed the coach? So I think the timing of the teachable moment is critical. If you go and talk to a young person after defeat, they're not going to hear a word you say. Their internal temperature is too high. I've gotten into many quarrels with players over the years trying to talk to them right after they lose. Make sure they know you're there, arm on the shoulder, tough match. Come back and talk to them 4 hours later in a calm and constructive and productive way. If you wait till the next day to have that conversation, it's my opinion that the scab is already starting to form and you're losing the moment. So I think the timing of capturing that teachable moment is critical.
Wow, very, very powerful. We have a lot of questions coming in. And the good news is that there's two types of themes of these questions. So I think there are two major points I think both you, doctor, and you, coach, could really take a stab at it. So I'm gonna separate all these questions into two buckets. So the first question, which I thought is really interesting, is these families, these parents are being told by their friends that, oh my gosh, you got to do this league. You got to be a part of the league. It starts at 7. And yes, there's a fall, winter, spring league of soccer or lacrosse. And oh my gosh, Joey's doing it. So Jimmy's got to do it. Come on, you got to. And there's a social moment where parents are feeling like, I guess everybody's doing it, so it's okay to do it. And so what do you say to that? Because a lot of these parents are just jumping on the bandwagon because they think it's okay because so-and-so who happens to be a doctor is letting their child do it. So talk to them about this. What?
Doc, you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, what I always tell my families is when I'm in the room with them and I'm talking to them, I always point out who's not in the room, which is their teammates,
Yeah.
their coaches, their athletic trainers, their athletic director. This is your problem, right? You get caught up and swept up and you want your kid playing on all these teams, guesting for this team, doing this showcase. That's fine. But if things go wrong, it is literally your problem. And your child, theoretically, and I don't know however many kids you have, but it's usually your biggest investment of your life. And you want to make sure that it's a great investment and a sound investment. And you have to make decisions and ignore all the noise. And it's hard, but you have to make decisions that you and your child feel are in the best interest of that child. Another thing I'll say real quick is if you overextend yourself as a parent who works and has other kids and all this stuff, it creates stress. You got to get to this practice. You got to leave work. You got to do this. So by doing more, you indirectly stress yourself out more, which gives you a little bit more of a shorter temper, a shorter fuse, and doesn't allow you to support and cope with your child when they face problems because you yourself are pretty stressed from being overstretched from time, energy, and most importantly, money.
That's great. One of my good friends is Dr. Michael Gervais, and I had him on my podcast, and he has coined a phrase or an acronym, and it is FOPO, FOPO, which is fear of people's opinions. That's exactly what you just said, Doctor. Make up your mind, do what you think is right, and all the other stuff is white noise.
That's awesome. So our second question, again, collective voices here, is that they are a parent who has these little athletes who are competing, and when the topic of failure comes up, some of these parents were not athletes, and they're trying to show their love by engaging in some type of conversation, but they don't know, am I doing it right? How do I communicate to my child, especially if they've lost or if they're going through, an injury? Like they're kind of caught where like, damned if I do, damned if I don't. And so what are your tips for those parents when it comes to the failure piece of how do you engage in your child? What do you do?
Coach, you want to go first?
Oh, you ducked that one. No, I think it really comes down to life lesson. Okay, how did you prepare for this experience? Were you sick? Maybe you weren't, in the right place. You went out and you competed. Maybe you performed under your potential. These things happen every day in life. Maybe that person or that team was simply better than you. That's awesome. Shake their hand. There's the bar. Try to come up to that bar. But everything we're doing is to prepare you for later. And maybe you just didn't have it all together today.
Yeah, I mean, I think of sports as kind of like a dry run for life.
There you go.
It's a great way to practice, to pivot when you need to, pilot different things. And again, with those teachable moments, you need to be able to control what you can control. So when you lose, like Coach said, you have to look at what did you do or didn't do to prepare. What did you get enough sleep? Were you up playing video games the night before? Were you eating Doritos all night the night before? It's very easy to point the finger. Coach didn't put me in. Coach put somebody in who's not as good. The ref did this. This mom said that. But we have to give kids the ability to sift through everything and focus only on what they can control. Unfortunately, and we all do it, we spend a lot of time in our heads getting frustrated about things that you literally can't control. And like you said, Coach, what other people do, say, and think is the most uncontrollable aspect of your life,
Yeah.
but it causes the greatest amount of frustration and anxiety.
Yeah, I mean, with my kids growing up, it was always about, doesn't matter if you win or lose. It's matter if you gave it your all. That's all you can imagine. It's all about effort. And then, you know what? May the best man win. And if you didn't win this time, it's luck. Next time you'll get lucky. It's okay. And I remember playing kids growing up, which my parents didn't go to tournaments and things because we had multiple kids in my family. But, I watched entourages of coach, psychologist, counselor, nutritionist, all on the sidelines. And I remember watching these kids I'm playing. I was playing for me. They were playing for that entourage. And you could tell who was joyful and who was not. And it definitely was the group that was not, was because they had so much pressure watching them on that court. And so this has been a fascinating conversation, Dr. Atanda and Coach. We could keep going on and on. There have been tremendous amounts of people saying how much they have gotten from your wisdom. So I want to thank you. And I also want to just provide these references that are on the screen right now to our families. First of all, the nemours.org website and the kidshealth.org website is just a treasure of wisdom and subject matter expertise tips that are there at your fingertips for our families to look for any types of questions you have. Obviously, if you have any questions about tonight's webinar, please feel free to email us at ESF Camps, admissions@esfcamps.com. And we'd be more than happy to provide that personal question to either Coach Assaiante or Dr. Atanda. But I want to thank you both for this tremendous webinar. We're better parents as a result of your wisdom that you've given us tonight. And thank you so much for joining us.
It was a total honor. And Dr. Atanda, you're a rock star.
Oh, thanks so much, Coach. I had a great pleasure of meeting both of you, and I really hope our paths cross again soon and we can do some work together moving forward.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Coach. Thank you, Doctor. And thank you for your participation tonight, everyone. We really appreciate it. We had a wonderful audience tonight, and thank you again. And we hope you gained something from it. Have a wonderful evening, and we look forward to our next webinar. Take care, everyone. Have a great night.
Good night.
Awesome. Take
Good night.
care.